Denver Broncos running back Melvin Gordon is 100% in on getting to a Super Bowl. Getting a ring is very important to him, even if it means that he takes a little bit of a step back as the premier running back for this team. We talk about Melvin Gordon. We also talk about Billy Turner adding a wrinkle to the right tackle competition. Plus, you get a little bit more on today's brand new episode, Locked on Broncos.
You are Locked on Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What's up, Broncos country? Welcome into a brand new episode of Locked On Broncos, your daily Denver Broncos podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much to everybody in Broncos country for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day on your favorite audio podcasting platform, or whether you watch us on YouTube. Hit that subscribe or that follow button so you never miss out on a day's worth of Denver Broncos news, content, coverage, and more every single day, all year long, from the South Stands to the end zone. I'm your host, as always, Cody Roark, senior Broncos analyst and reporter for Mile High Sports, joined alongside by my good friend, Sayre Bedinger. He's the site expert, predominantly orange.com. Sayre, my friend, I tell you what, as the Broncos get closer to the regular season, we're still searching for some answers as to maybe how the Broncos will manage the running back carry workload, as Justin Outen has said, hey, it could be a pitch count. We don't know what that truly means yet, but Melvin Gordon shared some insight after Wednesday's practice at the UCL Training Center on his mindset with he and Javonte, plus his goal and what he's really committed to this season, my friend. So let's, a lot to break down in today's episode of the show.
There is, Melvin Gordon, I think, has gotten a lot of mixed reviews from Broncos fans throughout his time with the team. And I think some of, the frustration has been justified at times. Of course, nobody likes it when a player fumbles. But I think for the most part, Melvin Gordon has been, over the last 2 years, in my opinion, the Broncos' best and most consistent source of offense. And I know that may not be saying a ton considering the offense hasn't been great, but man, he's been pretty much exactly as advertised, essentially guaranteed for over 1,000 yards from scrimmage and 10 touchdowns a year. And he kind of got pushed to the back burner a little bit this offseason. And I feel like a lot of people felt like, well, the Broncos could get by with Mike Boone as running back too. They don't necessarily need to bring back Melvin Gordon, but I think the team obviously and rightfully disagree with that. They brought Melvin Gordon back, but kind of with an unknown role for this season, which is interesting. Like, even Melvin, as of Wednesday's practice, was like, I don't know how the running back rotation is going to work out. But what he said is that he's just bought into the vision for this team, which is winning a Super Bowl. He said it. I want a ring. I want the ring more than anything. And I think it's interesting to hear him talk like that, because a lot of fans' perception of him might be completely different, that he's only out there to put up stats, or he's only in Denver to get at Chargers fans and the Chargers for letting him go, or different things like that. But I think Melvin Gordon obviously is going to be a huge part of this team this year, but in what capacity, it seems like not even he quite knows.
And he even said, too, he's going to go back, watch some Packers film to see maybe how they utilize both Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon. I feel like last year was really, truly a kind of a 60-40 to maybe a 55-45. I don't even know if my math's right there on those guys there. But it doesn't matter, because I feel like with what Javonte Williams can do and with what Melvin can do, I feel like they complement each other really, really well. And look, we had a very open, a very candid Melvin Gordon during Wednesday's press conference. He was very open about it. He says, I feel like the team wants Javonte to be the number one back. He said, but, for me, I tell myself every day when I come out on the field, I've got, you got to go earn it. Nothing is handed to you. Nothing is given to you. And so when he gets reps on the field, in his mindset, he's all about taking advantage of it, doing the best of his ability, whether that be running the football, whether it be catching the ball out of the backfield and scoring touchdowns. He's going to find a way to impact the game. And I think that the Broncos will need both of these guys, Sarah. Contrary to a lot of Broncos fans that were mad when Melvin came in because it unseated Philip Lindsay as the main guy in Denver. I get that. I get that the Colorado kid was a hometown favorite. We love Philip Lindsay here on the show, but Melvin Gordon was sitting easily the better running back, folks. I mean, there's no disputing that. And there's nothing wrong with that. Melvin, I think, has kind of gotten a little bit of a raw deal from fans. Granted, he's fumbled the ball several times, and sometimes his fumbles have really come at inopportune times, but he's also an impact player. And I think that the things that we as people choose to get mad at when watching sports, I think is something to keep an eye on here. But Melvin, like I said, he's going to make the Broncos better. He's going to give them, Sarah, in my opinion, with Russell Wilson, with Javonte Williams, with this offense, he's going to give them the best chance possible to getting potentially to a Super Bowl. And I feel like that's really how it's going to play out. I feel like that's what matters the most. And he even said it like, I know I still have the juice. Granted, he's getting older. Running backs, they see a lot of contact. Denver is going to have to rely heavily on both these guys this season. And I feel like that's a good thing. It doesn't need to be a bad thing.
It does not, and I think we've talked about this before, and I think everybody that still has some kind of vendetta against Melvin Gordon's got to kind of just get over it. He is going to be a key piece of this team, and I think we definitely saw, backing up what he said on Wednesday last season, that he does still have the juice. I mean, he had one of the fastest plays from scrimmage of any player in the entire NFL last year on his touchdown run early in the season against the New York Giants. So to me, I feel like Melvin Gordon is one of those guys that, man, he's such a pro, and he understands the game well. And I think he's going to be a great fit for this offensive scheme. I really do feel like even with a 55-45 split, I don't think anybody needs to really worry about Javonte Williams being minimized in this offense
No.
by any means. And Melvin kind of just sort of like, it's such a weird way to think about things, but you know what? I feel like Melvin is going to be an impactful guy. He can do everything at the running back position. And I think the teammates in Denver, contrary to like, there seems to be such a weird disconnect between, I feel like the teammates that he has in Denver really like him. And I feel like there's a
Yeah.
disconnect between him and the fans, which is so odd. Like the coaches like him, the players like him. Why haven't the fans yet embraced him? I think that it's time to embrace Melvin Gordon again. I'm going to call for that again. I know we called for it earlier this offseason when he was re-signed by the team, but I think it's time to really rally around him, make him feel welcome in Broncos country, even though this is his third season with the team, man. It's kind of crazy that we're still talking like that about him, but I think he's going to be a huge part of this team and a huge part of one of what I believe is going to be one of the best Broncos teams that we've had in the last 10 years.
I agree with you, Sayre, 110%. Can't wait to see what Melvin can do for this Broncos offense here this upcoming season. But speaking of the offense, let's take a look at the right tackle competition with Billy Turner's return off the PUP list. What does that mean for Calvin Anderson? What does it mean for Cam Fleming? We dive into that in a little bit more coming up here in just a moment. But before we do that, let me tell you about LinkedIn. And as you gear up for fall, you need the right people on your team to help your small business fire on all cylinders. And LinkedIn Jobs is here to make it easier to find the people that you want to talk to faster and for free. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond to the world's largest professional network of over 810 million people. Then add your job and the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring so that your network can help you find the right people to hire. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and the experience so you can quickly prioritize who you'd like to interview and to hire. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. And did you know that every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Billy Turner was activated off of the physically unable to perform list early on in the week for this Denver Broncos football team, which adds a brand new wrinkle to the right tackle competition. Thank you so much, Broncos country, for tuning in, making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day on your favorite podcast and providers, or whether you're watching us on YouTube. If you're not making us your first listen today, you need to change that right away so you can stay up to date with the best objective Denver Broncos news, content, and coverage that is out there, all in one place, 30 minutes or less every single day, because it is Locked On Broncos, your team every day. Sayre, my friend Billy Turner, it's great to have him off the PUP list for this Broncos team. We know that his veteran experience has been very valued. We even heard from Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett after practice, was kind of asked a question, is he going to be at right tackle or is he in line for some other positions? And Hackett's response, I think, was very insightful. He says, anytime something like this happens, he kind of gives me that dark look because he said his first year in Green Bay, they had him playing guard. The second year in Green Bay, they had him playing right tackle. And then the third year is playing right tackle, left guard, right guard. He was doing a little bit of everything except center. And at this point, I mean, Billy Turner is a guy who has the opportunity. I think if the Broncos needed to, they could put him anywhere. But how does his addition coming off the PUP list make him maybe in line for the competition at right tackle where he can maybe overthrow a guy like Calvin Anderson or compete with him?
Well, I think one of the most important things to note, and this was pointed out by somebody else, I don't remember who pointed this out, but I didn't think about it either. The entire starting five offensive line, if you will, didn't play in that first preseason game except for Calvin Anderson at the right tackle position, which to me kind of indicates, hey, if there's a competition at a certain position, those guys are going to probably go out there and be playing a little bit in the preseason. To me, this kind of indicates, even though we're just now getting Billy Turner back out on the practice field, that there is an active competition at that right tackle spot with he and Billy Turner, because Calvin did play into that first preseason game. And it wasn't like he was just out there for the first couple of series or anything. He was out there for quite a bit in that game. So I think definitely there's competition there at the right tackle position. And Billy Turner, I mean, like you mentioned, he's played a lot of football and he's got a lot of experience. And I think he's been pretty darn good at the right tackle spot. And it speaks to a number of other different spots on this offensive line that kind of, it wasn't necessarily the default that Nathaniel Hackett mentioned right tackle, but I think that's kind of where the Broncos said, hey, we want to have him at right tackle, but he can do these other things. So it seems like right tackle is kind of plan A for right now, although the Broncos do have some other options there.
And they do. And for Calvin Anderson, he's been the guy that's been getting all the first team reps at tackle since the start of training camp, because obviously with Turner working on the side field, trying to come back, get off the PUP list, there really wasn't anybody else to challenge Calvin Anderson. I mean, Tom Compton had back surgery, and he was another one of those guys that was expected to be in the mix. During OTAs, Ben Braden was getting reps at the tackle position, but they just waived him with an injury settlement as well. So for me, I'm looking at the writing on the wall for this Broncos team. It's kind of wide open right now, and I think that they're really waiting for Billy Turner to start doing a little bit more. He's doing position-specific drills. Now, in Wednesday's practice, he was not there. He was excused for a personal matter, according to Broncos head coach Nathaniel Hackett. But even Billy Turner, when he met with the media just the other day, he was telling us, he said, even though I've played in the system, there's still an acclimation period because I'm playing with a brand new quarterback. I'm playing with a brand new offensive line and a bunch of guys that I haven't necessarily played football with yet. So being very open and very transparent. He says, for me, there will be a little bit of time to get acclimated, but, will the Broncos have to rely on his experience? For Calvin Anderson, he struggled against Micah Parsons when they had joint training camp practices. And I think in a situation like that, you have to wonder, like, did that impact his confidence in any way? I'm not necessarily sure, because he's still going out there every single day. He's still got a bright smile on his face. He's got a really good attitude. But when you go up against a guy like Micah Parsons, who, in my opinion, Sayre, I think he's going to do that. And when he gets a one-on-one with any offensive tackle, he's going to usually probably get the better of them because of how physically gifted and athletically talented he is. But you want to see that. And I think the coaching staff wanted to see him against the Cowboys in a preseason game. How does he respond from that joint training camp practice where he did struggle against Parsons? And of course, going through this week, how is he going to do against the Buffalo Bills? We don't know if the Bills are going to play any of their defensive starters. We know the Broncos more than likely not going to play any of their starters, which we'll debate on that a little bit later on here in the show. But you have to wonder, who else could step up, because Billy Turner's not going to play right away. So that means that there's a guy by the name of Cam Fleming, Sayre, who's been also rotating and getting in reps on the offensive tackle side of things at right tackle with the first team and second team offense.
And I think what Cam Fleming brings to the table is that experience as well. He got into the lineup last year. I think he kind of exceeded most everybody's expectations. Everybody was expecting him to be absolutely terrible, and he ended up doing a pretty decent job. So I think definitely there's something there. And exactly to what you're saying, you want to see Calvin Anderson go out there against these opponents that the Broncos are getting in these first couple of preseason matchups. Buffalo may not trot out Von Miller against Calvin Anderson, but I guarantee you, I guarantee you Buffalo's second and third wave of edge players is much better than you're going to typically see in a preseason game. I mean, these guys, they have been investing absolutely heavily on that side of the ball and on the defensive front seven. I mean, just looking at their depth chart right now, you got Boogie Basham and AJ Epinesa, who were both second round picks in the last couple of years. Shaq Lawson is listed as their fifth edge. And then you've got obviously a number of other defensive line players who are going to get matchups off the tackle that are going to come right at Calvin Anderson, in this game, in this preseason matchup, who are going to get snaps. So I think he's going to be well tested. And the Broncos know, and Nathaniel Hackett has mentioned this previously in the offseason, like they know what Billy Turner brings to the table. Yes, there would be an acclimation period, but knowing what he brings to the table, I think you can make an educated decision, even if Billy Turner's not out there kind of rotating reps throughout training camp or throughout these practices or throughout the preseason. I feel like you kind of have an idea of what he brings to the table. You want to see Calvin Anderson go out just like last year with Bobby Massey in the competition that they had. You want to see him go out there and win that job, not necessarily lose it and give it up to the veteran guy. I think you would want to see Calvin just say, okay, we feel really comfortable with Calvin Anderson out there, as opposed to we would feel more comfortable with Billy Turner out there.
Well, and you know what, too? Let's just throw a hypothetical out there. Let's say that the Bills, they play their starters 1 or 2 series, right? Because it's a second preseason game. Maybe they want to see it. So you have Gregory Rousseau, you have Von Miller as those guys you really have to worry about. I think this would also be a perfect opportunity. And, while you have to perform, like if Calvin Anderson does a really good job, holds his own against those guys, then all of a sudden maybe you're like, okay, hey, I feel a little bit better. The coaching staff says, you know what? Okay, we feel a little bit better because going against Von Miller, Gregory Rousseau, that's a challenge. Ridiculous challenge, by the way. And maybe a challenge that the Broncos will have to face at some point down the road, maybe deep in the playoffs if the Broncos can win the division, maybe meet up with the Buffalo Bills. Hey, anything's a possibility at this point in time there. So something there is that, but also take a look at other positions on the offensive line. I mean, does that kind of solidify, as we've been talking, Dalton Reisner could potentially be one of those guys on the trade block if you're looking at it, if you're trying to get guys. But with Netani Muti's injury now, it almost kind of makes Reisner staying here a real possibility for the Broncos. Like I think it kind of eliminates a trade out of the way here for Reisner. So I think he stays there at the left guard spot, which gives in turn Billy Turner a chance to just stay at one position, which I think for him would be beneficial for him. And I know that's something that he's looking for at this point in his career. But Broncos country coming up here in just a moment. Sayre and I are going to dive a little bit deeper in some of the news and notes around this Denver Broncos football team ahead of the Buffalo Bills matchup on Saturday. We also give an update on Lloyd Cushenberry's injury and what it entails. We get to that coming up here in just a moment. But I have a very important message for you. You're hanging out with some friends and putting back a few drinks. A few becomes a few too many. And as the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay. It's no big deal. What are the odds you'll get pulled over anyway? And even so, what's the worst that could happen? Your insurance goes up, you lose your license, you lose your job, you total your car, you kill someone? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk, and the results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're ready to drive after a few drinks, think again, play it safe, and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone's life forever. Drive sober or get pulled over. As we jump into the fourth quarter action on today's episode, Locked On Broncos, we're going to get into some Broncos news and notes ahead of the team's matchup this Saturday against the Buffalo Bills. It's going to be an 11 a.m. Mountain Time kickoff. So, hey, for the Broncos, it's good. We get to wake up on Saturday, get to watch some Broncos football, and then you back to business for the preseason finale the week afterwards. We're looking forward to all that. Thank you once again for making Locked On Broncos your first listen of the day every single day. Sayre, we got an injury update on Broncos center Lloyd Cushenberry from Nathaniel Hackett after Wednesday's press conference. And he says he's dealing with a knee injury, but it's not serious. That's good news. Okay. So initially, we're waiting to see who's coming out for practice. Luke Wattenberg made his return to practice, went off to the bike on the side immediately just to kind of get warmed up, but he's working his way back from what I believe is an ankle injury. But Cushenberry, dealing with the knee injury, did come out to practice and was heavily involved in the jog through period by watching and observing, hearing the play call, visualizing, and he was even doing some coaching up for the centers that were getting work. Luke Wattenberg, Graham Glasgow getting a lot of work there at that position, which Nathaniel Hackett calls Glasgow a really good security blanket because you do have a guy you can rely on with starter experience, and he took great angles. That's one thing Hackett said. So some good news on Lloyd Cushenberry, not expected to miss really any time at all.
Which is awesome for the Denver Broncos, and great news about Graham Glasgow as well. It sounds like in the last week or so, I mean, he's really been ramping up and really proving his value to the team. Like we talked about the interior offensive line maybe being a spot where the Broncos could look to trade somebody. And I think as of right now, you almost just kind of hope for the status quo a little bit at the interior line spot. Graham Glasgow might be your number one backup offensive lineman overall. So definitely looking towards keeping him around unless an offer comes along that just absolutely blows you away, right? You want to be able to have a guy like that you can rely on, depend on at multiple positions. We know how important that is to head coach Nathaniel Hackett. So I think that's big. And speaking of Graham Glasgow, it sounds like we might see him snapping to Brett Rippon potentially to start this game against Buffalo, maybe Josh Johnson again, one way or another. I think obviously the Broncos are going to split these guys as reps, but Cody, to me, I feel like what we talked about earlier in the week, maybe you see Brett Rippon go out there. If this is a true competition for the QB2 job, maybe you see Brett Rippon get to go out there with some of those guys in the second unit, that second offense, and go up against maybe the likes of Von Miller, and who knows how many of the starters the Bills are going to play. But I think it would be a super, super valuable evaluation for somebody like Brett Rippon to be able to go out there against that unit. But at the same time, if these are the reps that Josh Johnson, if you know who your QB2 is going to be and you have an opportunity to see Josh Johnson against the better of the Bills defenders, do you take it? I'm interested to see what the Broncos do there, but one thing we know for sure, they're going to be splitting the reps at QB against the Buffalo Bills in the second preseason game, so not likely to see Russell Wilson once again.
Well, and I asked Coach Hackett maybe what the plan was because, Josh Johnson got the start against the Dallas Cowboys. Do you want to see Brett Rippon maybe get the start and then give him the opportunity to work with the guys that obviously Josh Johnson got to work with, just to be able to see who your clear-cut quarterback 2 is? We'll see. We'll see what happens. I mean, Nathaniel Hackett said, they're going to get splits. They're going to split reps, but we don't know in which order yet. So that's going to be the mystery that we're going to find out leading up to kickoff on Saturday. But some other news and notes, it's just a little thing I wanted to dive into. There's a lot of Broncos fans that want to see Russell Wilson and the starters playing the preseason. Sayre, I am on the boat personally of saying I do not think the Broncos should play any of their starters in the preseason. There's no reward in doing it. There's too much risk involved with it. And it's kind of a lose-lose for Hackett because if he plays a starter, they get hurt. Oh, why is he playing the starters? If he doesn't play the starters, oh, why isn't he playing the starters? So it's kind of like this lose-lose perception. What is your opinion? Should the Broncos play any of their starters in the preseason?
Well, I think you can look at last year's Super Bowl champion Los Angeles Rams at the example for this. And obviously having a couple of coaches that were with the Rams last year helps you make an informed decision here. But also the Green Bay Packers as well. I'm pretty sure the Los Angeles Rams, Cody, they won the Super Bowl without playing their starters in the entire preseason. So I don't think it's a necessity by any means. I think just the fact that the most recent Super Bowl champion proved that you can do that, it means that the preseason is exactly what it is. It's meaningless for your starters, and it's very meaningful for guys who are fighting for roster positioning, guys who are fighting for jobs around the NFL. I think it does much better from a coach's perspective to allow guys that are fighting for their NFL lives out there to put things on film, put things on tape for all 32 teams to see, including the team that you're currently on, to be able to prove to the coaches that you're with, like Nathaniel Hackett said about the roster cuts going from 90 to 85. And the reason why he put those players out there on the practice field before making those decisions, along with general manager George Payton, is because things can change kind of just like at the drop of a hat. And that's not to say they're making decisions based out of emotion or anything like that. But I think if a guy goes out there and makes some big plays and shows you some things, might change your decision making a little bit. So to me, as far as the starters are concerned, who cares? You want those guys ready for Seattle week 1. You want those guys healthy and into the season. You want them to be playing in the real games when they really matter. Right now, what you want to be doing is discovering who are going to be those guys that are going to be playing key roles for you throughout the season, your key depth, guys who are going to make your practice squad, because those guys ultimately are going to play down the road as well. So I think that's a much better tool for the preseason than playing the starters.
You couldn't have said it any better, my friend. That's how I feel. That's how Nathaniel Hackett feels. And look, I know everyone wants to see Russell Wilson throw a pass as a Bronco, but wait until the Seattle Seahawks game week 1. He gets to go back to Seattle and potentially light up his former team. That would be a really, really cool treat. I think Broncos country can wait for that to happen. Nothing they're going to do in the preseason is going to make them either better or worse come the regular season unless somebody gets injured, which then all of a sudden it's like, why did they even do it? So I'm with you. But Broncos country, let us know your thoughts down below in the YouTube comment section. Should the Broncos play their starters in the preseason? We're always eager for your thoughts because we know that right now it's kind of 50-50. It's split with the fan base. They should play. They shouldn't play. We have a whole lot of that in our comment section. We want to know for sure. We want to see who edges things out here on Locked On Broncos. Sayre Bedinger and myself, we will be back tomorrow for a brand new episode, Locked On Broncos. We'll get the final Thursday practice report. The team will travel to Buffalo on Friday. Then, bam, preseason game number 2 on Saturday against the Buffalo Bills. Malik Reed told me he's really excited about going back and being able to see Von Miller. Even if Von doesn't play, he's looking forward to seeing a guy he really, really looks up to. We'll have you covered on Locked On Broncos here, ladies and gentlemen, your favorite podcast provider, and on YouTube.